In the heart of ancient Rome, where power, religion, and law intermingled, there existed a group of women so revered that their purity was seen as essential to the very survival of the empire. They were the Vestal Virgins, 6 women chosen at a young age to serve the goddess Vesta, the Roman deity of hearth, home, and family. Their responsibility was sacred. They vowed to remain chaste for 30 years, tending the sacred flame that was believed to safeguard Rome's prosperity and the Roman Empire's future. But what happened when one of these virgins faltered in their sacred duty? What could possibly break the vow of chastity that was considered not just a personal commitment, but a divine promise to the gods themselves? Well, brace yourself, because the punishment for breaking their vows was nothing short of horrific. The power of the Vestal Virgins. The Vestals were among the most respected women in Remang society. They held a prestigious position, living in the house of the Vestals, located right next to the Roman Forum, where they were tasked with keeping the sacred fire of Vesta burning day and night. They were believed to possess magical powers. Their purity was the key to ensuring Rome's success. The Romans even believed that as long as the Vestals upheld their vows, Rome would be invincible. These women were granted privileges that most other women of their time could only dream of. They could own property, make wills, and even hold public office. They were revered and enjoyed a level of respect that far surpassed that of other women in Rome. In short, they were the backbone of the Roman faith and the empire's future. But what happened if a Vestal Virgin was caught in a moment of weakness? The horror behind the punishment. The punishment for breaking their vow of chastity was severe, and it was designed to be as cruel and public as possible. According to Roman law, if a Vestal Virgin violated her vow of chastity, it wasn't just a matter of losing her status. She would be sentenced to death. But the Romans didn't just execute these women in a quick and clean way. Oh no, the punishment was far worse. The unthinkable and gruesome fate awaiting these women was known as being buried alive. Yes, buried alive. How the punishment unfolded. When a Vestal Virgin was accused of breaking her vow, the entire city of Rome held its breath. These accusations were not taken lightly, as the violation of a Vestal's chastity was considered an offense to the gods themselves. Once the accusation was made, the trial began, and if the woman was found guilty, which was in most cases inevitable, she would be sentenced to one of the most horrifying punishments known to the Roman world. The condemned Vestal Virgin would be led to a small underground chamber where a tomb-like enclosure had been prepared. This chamber was large enough to hold her body, but not large enough to offer any comfort. She would be stripped of her sacred clothing and dressed in plain robes, marking the fall from grace. Here's the horrifying part. The woman would be sealed inside a small, confined space where no light or air could reach her. This was done not in the heat of battle, not in the spectacle of the Colosseum, but in cold, suffocating silence, a metaphor for her punishment. As a woman who had broken the vows that were considered the lifeblood of Roman society, no one could hear her screams, no one could see her suffering. She would be left to die alone in the dark, a painful and terrifying end to what had once been a life of immense power and respect. The torture of the sacred flame. Even more disturbing is the psychological torment that these women endured during their trial and sentencing. The sacred flame that they tended to was seen as the soul of Rome itself. Losing it, even for a moment, would signal the fall of Rome, and the Vestals were constantly reminded of the consequences of their sacred duty. Imagine the overwhelming pressure, the constant fear that any mistake, any slip in their vow would lead to this horrendous end. They were trained to be perfect, and even the slightest failure could lead to their death. The sacredness of their role. What made the Vestal Virgins so special was not just their sacred duties but their role in Roman society. For centuries, they had been the embodiment of purity, the physical manifestation of Rome's enduring power. The destruction of their bodies after their execution was more than a punishment. It was the obliteration of the soul of Rome. The Romans wanted to erase not only the person who had failed them, but the very symbol of Rome's fragile divinity. So what led to this terrible fate? Why were these women subject to such an extreme punishment? Was it simply the nature of the law, or was there something deeper at play? The Roman code and the gods. For the Romans, their gods were not just entities to be worshipped. They were real, tangible forces that governed every aspect of Roman life. The Vestal Virgins were the caretakers of this divine order. If they were to fail, the consequences weren't just personal, they were cosmic. The Romans believed that the gods would punish them all, not just the individual who had committed the sin. It wasn't just about chastity. It was about the integrity of the empire. Rome's success was directly tied to the purity of its sacred rituals, and the Vestals were at the center of this web. Their purity symbolized Rome's strength, and their impurity symbolized its weakness. Breaking their vow didn't just mean the fall of a woman. It meant the potential downfall of an empire. The legacy of the Vestal Virgins over time, the punishment of the Vestal Virgins faded from practice as Christianity began to rise in power. The concept of chaste women, however, remained a powerful symbol throughout history. The tragic fate of the Vestals, who were once revered but ultimately lost everything in the name of purity, serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of perfection, the consequences of unchecked power, and the price of unyielding belief. The last vestiges of the Vestal Virgins disappeared by the end of the 4th century, but their story has lived on in the annals of history. Today, when we think of the Roman Empire, we often remember its military might, its architectural marvels, and its long reign of dominance. Yet the story of the Vestals is perhaps one of the most chilling reminders of how power, religion, and punishment can intertwine, leaving a legacy of suffering and fear that spans centuries. The story of the Vestal Virgins' punishment is one that reveals much about the values and beliefs of the Roman Empire. It exposes the extremes to which an empire would go to maintain its control, and the price that individuals had to pay for failing to uphold sacred promises. It is a grim reminder that in the world of ancient Rome, no one, not even the most powerful women, were immune to the brutal consequences of their actions. If you found this story shocking and intriguing, make sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more eye-opening historical tales like this one.